And the driver for this alliance, I think, came from the government response or lack of response to the IAA STD report, the ISTED report, which came out in 2008, which had clearly had very firm conclusions that in agriculture, business as usual, i.e. intensive monocultural agriculture, didn't have a future, and that there needed to be a fundamental shift towards agroecology, but at the same time there also needed to be key socio-economic changes and trade reforms, and particular attention to the role of women in food production, particularly in the global south. We were extremely disappointed that although the government firmly endorsed the findings of the ISTED report, there was simply no obvious action taken in the UK as a result of it. And so we feel that the time has come to start pressurising the government and the research establishments to start taking agroecology as a serious option for the future, which tackles the problems that the global food production faces in a far more integrated way and cohesive way than the current system of intensive chemical fossil fuel-led farming. We feel very strongly that this movement that's developing, it should be firmly set in the framework of the food sovereignty movement, which has grown considerably in the last 4 years since ISTED came out, and has grown stronger, with the objective of farmers and local populations having much more control over their food production and making basic decisions. And Patrick will say a little bit more, I'm sure, about that later. The Alliance has some very simple objectives. Is to really change the nature of the debate about what sort of agriculture we want in the future. So we shift it from a technical, high-tech system towards an agroecological one, and within that we would want to see the topics of soil science and agronomy, biological pest control moved up the research agendas in the UK. So we had some serious money put towards developing agroecological techniques, but also ensuring that farmers are trained in their use and understand how to use them properly. The aim of the organisation is not to try and duplicate the work of others. It's to bring people together so we become a more coherent political force, so we actually have more clout than we do if we were acting on our own. And we hope that many more organisations will join in and press with us to get this shift in funding and in thinking about how we tackle the problems of agriculture in the future in this country. We also see there's a huge education job to be done, not only of politicians but of the media, and indeed some of the scientists who work in the agricultural disciplines in our research establishments at the moment. And we don't underestimate the size of that task. So we're launching here today with every expectation of it being a tough struggle, but if we've got enough people working together and complementing each other's work in a way that can add value to everybody's efforts, then we feel that we can really start to make some progress and shift that agenda to our way of thinking, because in the end we feel that working within the limits of the planet, within the biological limits and the physical and chemical limits of the planet, is the only way we're ever going to make any progress towards sustainable and durable food production, which provides people with food, which is the first priority of farming. So that's what the Alliance is about. There is some paperwork at the back on the right, which gives you an outline of the objectives. There's also some membership forms. Membership isn't charged at the moment. It's for organisations to join rather than individuals. But if you are an individual and you're interested in getting on a mailing list, then we'd be more than happy to have you on that mailing list and send you information by email largely. And so if you want to sign on, please pick up a form at the back or speak to me afterwards, and I'll take a note of your address and send you the appropriate paperwork electronically. So thanks very much for coming, and we look forward to your support in the future.
Very we go straight on for an equally pungent and brief remarks from Patrick Mulvey.
Pete mentioned the ISTAT report, which published in 2008. And for the social movements, the Campesina, other peasant movements in the world, the ISTAT report didn't say anything new. But what it did, it confirmed scientifically what people have been saying for a long time, that the smaller scale, the more ecologically, the more biodiverse, are more sustainable systems and indeed more productive than industrial monocultures. And so what we're concerned about, and we want to take forward the international dimension of this discussion in the Alliance as UK Food Group, what we're concerned about is to make sure that the framing of the discussion around agroecology actually matches and supports what the social movements have been saying and what the majority of food providers of the world are actually doing. We summarised a lot of this a couple of years ago in a publication which many of you would have seen. It's on our website, and I can give it to you afterwards if you want. Securing future food towards ecological food provision. And I think the take-home message is that unless the discussions on agroecology are properly framed within the food sovereignty framework, then it will be co-opted. And we already see in this country it being co-opted by some science organisations, it's being co-opted by some of the corporations to mean what they want it to mean, which is a greening of industrial agriculture. The agroecology that I hope the Alliance will promote is one which is firmly rooted in smaller scale, more peasant, more biodiverse, more resilient, more climate-proof, more locally controlled type of food provision. Thank you.
Now, we now move on to Helen Browning. You know, the Chief Executive of the Soil Association.
Thank you, Crispin. It's really nice to be here. I've been over the road all day today. I've had a battering. The Soil Association has had a battering. And it always serves, I suppose, as a fantastic reminder about why what we're launching here today is so important, how we do need to really be working together now, even more than ever before, on trying to showcase and develop further the kind of solutions that we really are going to need to make sure that we can feed the world population fairly and humanely. So I really welcome the launch of this, and I'm really pleased that it builds on the great work that the all-party parliamentary group has been doing on agroecology. I think it's been really helpful to have that focus over the past few months and years. There is a real need to up our game still further, to make sure that we are putting the right, I'd like to say the right spin, but I think that's because I've been there all day. But to make sure that we are really upping our game. As a farmer myself, I know that we still have a lot to learn. I think we still have to be really hungry to continue to develop our systems, to learn and deepen our practice in our farming, actually, because we're not there yet. Certainly in the organic movement, we're not there yet. And we still need to push the boundaries. We still need more of the right kinds of research. And we still need to be working together and supporting each other in that endeavour. There's a lot to do. And so I really welcome this, and I really hope that we can continue to be quite honest about where our systems are still failing, or where we still have some really big challenges to tackle, how we are going to up productivity in some systems, and how we're going to do that in a way that is fair for everybody, especially for society at large. So thank you for all of you who have been doing so much work to pull this together.
Now we have Michel Cambert of the University of Coventry.
Good evening, everyone. It's been a long day, but a very exciting day. I think this is a historical moment for a lot of people who've been isolated in their institutions or on their farms, who've been thinking, working for alternatives, but haven't had enough of a critical mass of people or network of individuals on which to rely on, exchange ideas, get emotional support, intellectual support. So I think this is very, very important. The creation of the Alliance for Agroecology in this country at this point in time, when there's massive neglect on the part of the government for agroecological pathways, is very important. A safe space where people can come together to think, to gain competence, to analyze, to formulate their visions, and strategize to challenge technocratic power as well as corporate power. So I celebrate that moment. I think it's very important. I forgot my glass, but let's raise it. Have a taste of that. What would I hope? What would I wish the Agroecological Alliance to do? I mean, it's the new year. We can wish things. I think one area where the Alliance could be very effective in the coming years is one challenging agricultural research and development, challenging the kind of priorities and governance structures and organization of research that's taken us more and more on the pathway of industrial food and farming, with all its social, ecological and economic problems. Really pushing for reforms in the production of knowledge in universities, policy think tanks. That's one. I think the Alliance can play a role. Second, it seems to me the Alliance could also highlight the enormous contributions of farmers, consumers, food providers all over the world, including in Europe and the UK, in actually innovating, developing technologies that are more ecologically sound and inclusive. And not only technologies, but institutions that hold the food system together. This is largely unseen. I was talking about this with a number of people today, but there's a lot of work done by farmers, food providers, food processors of a small scale that's very innovative. And it seems to me that the Alliance could strengthen these horizontal networks of innovation and more decentralized, dispersed, distributed campuses of learning across fields, forests, peri-urban landscapes, and urban farms. The third opportunity or possibility is complementing the carrot approach with the stick approach. There are momentous forces that are pushing the system towards further corporatization, privatization of land, seeds, knowledge, and enclosure of the food system for the benefit of the very few. And that needs to be challenged. And there may be an opportunity here for the Alliance to think about novel means of challenging the Goliaths of the food system, using a variety of means, including legal means, and bringing together not just tens of dozens of people, but literally millions of people across Europe to challenge the GM path, but also other options that are being pushed by the establishment, both corporate and technocratic states. So those would be the three things on my wish list for the Alliance, which obviously will need a long life to be able to realize them, but we're in for a long haul, and I think this is going to be a very solid, resilient institution that will be challenging, will be innovative, and will be reconstructive in its agenda. So thank you.
Now we come to Nick Lampkin, who is the director of the Organic Research Centre at Newark.
Feels a bit like Mock the Week and the comedians standing up giving odd presentations, but anyway. I'm really pleased to welcome the formation of the Agroecology Alliance and to contribute to that process. The Organic Research Centre, since its outset, has been very committed to encouraging best organic and agroecological practice. The principles underpinning those ideas are really important. Certification for organic is a helpful addition to ensure the economic viability of farms, but there are key underlying principles that we share in common. And one thing that's come out for me during the day today has been this idea of commonality. There are many organisations represented here. some of whom would be quite keen not to identify themselves as organic. The Organic Research Centre itself has often debated this issue. But I think we actually share such a high degree of commonality of ideas and thinking about social issues, ecological issues, food quality issues, a whole range of topics that we should really recognise and celebrate that commonality. And the Agroecology Alliance provides an opportunity for the various organisations that are interested to come together and do that. For our part, we're very keen to support the work of the Agroecology Alliance in a number of ways, partly through the policy engagement with DEFRA. It's clearly barren ground if you judge by the conference across the road. But actually, it's clear, certainly in the European Union, but also to some extent in DEFRA, that there are some open doors. And we need to work on those and try and keep those open. There are people who are willing to listen and engage with the message that we all have to bring. It's not completely sterile position. The second thing I think is we really need to move forward this idea that research and development is not something that comes from on top. It is something that can come up from the bottom and be moved forward from the bottom. Two initiatives really have come through in recent times to help move that forward. The first is the Dutch Originals Food and Farming Partnership, which the Soil Association are leading. We're also engaged with, but is not an exclusively organic activity. It is broad for the agroecology movement in general, and provides a real opportunity to farmers to engage with researchers and think about how to move systems development forward. The second issue, which I'm really keen to move forward, is to be aware of what's coming up with CAP reform. Now, it's a boring issue. I'm a policy nerd at times. Apologies for that. But there is a new opportunity there which is at the moment little recognised because everyone's fussing about greening and those sorts of things. And that's called the European Innovation Partnership. It sounds very boring. But the idea from the European Commission's point of view is that it will enable bottom-up initiatives to move forward practical research and innovation to help farmers. That means bringing groups of farmers, researchers, advisors and other organisations together to really make it deliver a bottom-up approach. There is an opportunity there to be grasped. My fear is that DEFRA, particularly given the tone across the road that Helen so well described, and I've had some direct feedback as well, my fear is that that initiative, at least in the UK, will be grasped by the corporate agenda. And we need to work together through the Agroecology Alliance to try to make sure that that is not the only agenda that the UK supports. As part of that process, we'd like to support that by supporting the idea of an innovation platform for agroecology, which will directly work to support groups that want to form and gain from that RD, rural development funding opportunities. That's not a separate initiative. It's meant to be complementary to these efforts and really focused on the RDP. But we do need to come together this year to engage with DEFRA to make sure that the implementation of what's going to take place in 2014, 2015 is not just something that suits the corporate agenda, it's something that will work with and for us as well. So I'm hoping that the Agroecology Alliance will be a mechanism to really help that to happen. Thank you for setting it up.
Now we have Julia Wright, also from the University of Coventry.
Thank you. Hi. Yes, it's the Centre for Agroecology and Food Security. Of course, we support the Alliance, and in fact, it's kind of formalising the networks which we already have in the UK. And when we started using the term agroecology a couple of years ago in the centre that we're running, we kind of were a bit cautious about it because although it's quite well known internationally, we didn't know whether anyone would understand what it meant in the UK. But over that last 2 years, there's been a lot of growth in the use of the word in networks and groups forming which are using the similar terms. So that's really great that we can all sort of formalise that now. And then I see in terms of the Alliance, a couple of things that I'd like to see happening from it. Well, one is more an awareness of how we can position ourselves. And some of you might know I've been doing a bit of work in Cuba, and when we look at what happened to them when the Soviet Union collapsed, it was the groups which had really, the minority groups which had sort of formed to work for organic farming, which were sort of slaving away in the background, which nobody was really taking any notice of. They weren't getting much funding. When the crash came, they were the ones who came to the fore, and the government turned to them for help, and so did civil society. So it's about being prepared, and even if it seems like it's hopeless or, we're only in minority, it doesn't mean it's always going to be like that. Not that we should necessarily focus on that as an outcome, but it's worth bearing that in mind. And the other thing is that one of the things I'd like to see out of the Alliance is something which daughter of Frances Moore-Lappé is talking about, or trying to raise awareness. Some of you know Frances Moore-Lappé and her books, and her daughter's following in her footsteps. And she's made quite a nice video about sustainable agriculture and the reasons for it. And she's really trying to point out that we need to be aware of where these myths are coming from, and who's sort of perpetrating these myths that are out and about agroecology or organic farming, and sort of, where's it all coming from? It's not true that we need to feed the world, and it's not true that all farmers are interested in is making a profit. But these are narratives which keep being repeated, and I think one of the things we could do is, from a research perspective, or practical perspective, advocacy perspective, is to really get together and challenge those myths. And just finally, I'd just like to sort of welcome Michelle as the new director of the Centre for Agroecology and Food Security, starting with us in February. We're very pleased about that, so thank you.
And lastly but not leastly, in our list of speakers just now is, of course, one of the heroes of the day, Colin Tudge.
Well, I think this could be a pivotal moment. I mean, if it isn't, it'll be a terribly wasted opportunity. The fact of the matter is that we all know in this room that the world as a whole has to change radically. We all know in this room that the key to this is agriculture. You get agriculture right and everything else can start to work. On the other hand, agriculture isn't going to get right unless you get everything else working as well. So, as various people have been saying, you cannot approach the problem of making a better agriculture ad hoc. You also have to think about the economic framework in which it operates. You also have to think about the political framework in which it operates, and you also have to think about why you want it to change in the first place. Why are we? We can say, we're trying to feed the human race, but we can also ask the question, why do we give a damn? And that you can't ask that question without seriously addressing what you think the morality and underlying the morality, the metaphysics. What is your actual attitude to the universe as a whole? So you have to approach this on a very broad front. That's point one. All this means that you need a lot of very, very, very different kinds of people coming to the problem from very different angles. And the interesting thing is that is already happening. I mean, what we need to change the world is a critical mass, and a mass means you need a lot. Well, if you look at the world as a whole, there can be no doubt that the people who want the world to change radically at least are a huge minority. And you don't need a majority to change the world. You never get a majority in any true democracy. You only ever get minorities that, as it were, are big enough to make a difference. If we got sort of 10-20% of people on our side, then we would have the critical mass that could change the world. And the very interesting thing is that we already have that number, there's no doubt. Go out and ask people, do you like the way the world is? Do you want it to be different? Do you like the way agriculture is? Do you want it to be different? And there's no question that meant that a very, very large minority will be saying they want it to be different. So we have the mass. We also have very, very different kinds of people thinking about the problems from very different angles, which needs to be done. What we don't have, what is needed to make a critical mass critical, is coherence. You need all these different people doing different things, at least to be talking to each other. You don't want a merger, but you do want Via Campesina, for example, which is interested in peasant farming, talking to and with, say, the Soil Association, who are talking about the way that you actually farm, and talking to people, talking to all the different groups that are involved, talking to animal welfareists and so on and so on and so on. You need all these people working together. And there isn't anything, as far as I know, so far, that seriously brings all the different strands that already exist together. Now, this Agroecology Alliance could do that. And if it did, I think that means that the mass and all the intellectual strands could actually, as they say, go critical. And if that happened, then I think the next few years, next few decades could be very exciting. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks to all our speakers who have explained things very well. I want, before we leave, to thank Ruth West for putting this conference together. I don't know where she's hiding at the moment, but anyway, we're all much at her desk and getting it all straight. And in the meantime, I wish you a very good conference and a good dinner as well. Thank you all very much.